Yeah, it's only irrelevant to him. It's not irrelevant for the defensive players. We heard it from Kerry Williams, but nobody likes Kerry Williams. We've already heard it from Byron Maxwell a little bit, and you're going to continue to hear it because obviously if you're on the field for 41 minutes, there's going to be some issues, and we saw that again yesterday. I will agree with Chip is that there's no law that you can't stop the Redskins in that spot. I mean, obviously the defense can rise up and get a 3 and out, and all of a sudden, that makes the time of possession look a little bit better. But obviously it's a trend. It's a bad trend. And when Chip fails to acknowledge it, he looks bad. Everyone sees what's going on, and the bottom line is that the offense isn't converting enough, and the defense is on the field too much.
Yeah, and look, I agree, Chip, with the time of possession thing. I mean, I think yesterday was very egregious, but I do agree with what you said, and I agree with Chip. The defense has opportunities to get off the field on third down to kind of even that out to some extent. However, 42 minutes is just, I'm surprised they were even in that game yesterday. It shows you how bad the Redskins really are. But on the flip side of things, give me your analysis after 4 weeks of this run game now. We have a big enough sample size to realize, is this just, as many have indicated with Murray, square peg, round hole?
Yeah, a little bit. And you could sense his frustration after the game yesterday about not getting enough touches. And Chip talked in the offseason that he wanted a north-south runner, but he hasn't proven that with his play calling. It's still the east-west mentality. So, it becomes pretty clear that the big deal with LaShawn McCoy was his attitude. It wasn't his play on the field because he's a better fit for this offense just as a skill set and what he can do. So trying to spin that as we wanted a north-south runner. Well, if you wanted a north-south runner, let's, devise some plays to get that particular guy going. But is it fair, though, to ask that he's not doing what he wants to do because of the guard's inability to get forward push? I mean, is that a fair question to ask that? I mean, to say, look, he wants to run Murray straight up 3-4 yards at a time, get right back up on the ball, do it again, get into a rhythm, but that the guards are just not giving you the ability to run that style, so therefore we're making adjustments, which is causing us to run a style which we don't really want to run. Well, that's part of it. I mean, but I've said Alan Barber's not played well all season. I think Andrew Gardner played better than people thought when he was in there before the injury. Now you have backups in there, so it's a concern. And when Jason Peters went down, as I warned, they would kick Matt Tobin out to left tackle, and Dennis Kelly would play right guard. That group yesterday is not a good offensive line, and it's going to have trouble getting things done at any point. Hopefully, you get Jason back, and then you only have to deal with Tobin and Barber. And Barber's got to play better. But the underreported story in all of this is Jason Kelsey, who has not played well this season. And, basically you have a 265-pound center getting bullied around by these big nose tackles, and it's tough to run in the middle of the football field when your center is really geared towards that outside stuff, getting out and pulling and the athleticism and all that. So, yeah, the talent is more designed for the inside and outside zone, which is what Chip wants to run. But he said he didn't want that running back because he had a problem with his attitude. Now, that's fine because LaShawn McCoy can be a handful at times. But just understand that's what went on. This spin after the fact of DeMarco Murray's a better fit for this offense is just clearly not true at this point.
Yeah, Murray yesterday saying he wants the ball more. Or he didn't say I want the ball more. He didn't think he was getting it enough. Is really the case. Now, Chip would say, yeah, I want him to get the ball more. We're only running 51 plays. But in your opinion, is Murray the guy that should be getting the majority of the touches?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he proved himself last year. That's not a mirage when you go for 1,800 yards in this league. I think yesterday was about 14 and a half minutes before he ran the football. So, if that, to me, you're on the football field, you can run the guy. I look more at the coaching staff than that. The point of only running 51 plays, that part of it's true. If you're only running 50 plays instead of 75 or 80, yeah, obviously guys are going to get less touches. But they have to, go into the game plan-wise, with a concerted effort to get DeMarco Murray going early.
John McMullen's with us, 97.3 ESPN.com. Let's take a look at some of the other things that went on yesterday. Get your opinion on Sam Bradford. As you wrote, he gets it going. Finally, I thought he gained confidence in the second half. He looked like a different guy body language-wise. He finally had a little giddy-up. He made some nice throws. He made some nice plays. But I thought overall he was average. I mean, I'm not saying he had a great game yesterday, but he showed some positive signs. What did you think of Bradford yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, you could see it. You could see the confidence developing with the shots downfield, and all of a sudden the accuracy came back. And, confidence is an amazing thing. And once he started getting some hits down the field, he looked a lot better. But, yeah, you're right. Overall, it's just an average performance, and you still need to build on that and keep going from there. It's still not a surprise to me that he struggled. We always go back to it. It's not an excuse. He hadn't been on an NFL field for 700 days. It was going to take some time. I think the biggest story of the disappointment of the Philadelphia Eagles is the expectations more than anything else. The expectations were unrealistic. This is what you're going to get when you change so many pieces. This is a continuity-driven league, and it's going to take time for these guys to get on the same page. And it starts with the quarterback.
Obviously, the wide receivers yesterday, you saw Miles Austin make a play. He got behind. You saw Riley Cooper get behind. You saw Aguilar finally kind of get, himself going a little bit. Why do you think they were, I don't know if unwilling, or why didn't they take more shots down the field? It seemed like that was an area that was clearly a place where you can attack them.
Yeah, the Redskins had a big issue. I mean, Chris Culliver shouldn't have been out on the field, probably, but D'Angelo Hall was gone, so they had some issues outside the numbers. And give the Eagles credit because they took advantage of it. And the bad part is if you get a deep ball to Riley Cooper and a deep ball to Miles Austin in the same game, you got to win that game, because that's basically manna from heaven. That's not going to happen every week. That guys like that are going to get behind. So that's one of the biggest disappointments. But I thought, that was one of the few positives, because Chip realized how bad Washington was on the back end and how hurt they were. And he took his shots, and he should have. And it worked for the most part. It should have worked more because they had some misses. But at least they took those shots instead of just taking the checkdowns that they have been doing basically for 3 weeks.
Well, is that something they can build on, or is that a product of Washington's secondary being that poor? Or is that something that legitimately, yes, they can start to, feel more confident going down the field?
I just, I don't think it is something to build on when you're playing Darrelle Revis or somebody like that, because Riley Cooper and Miles Austin and Nelson Aguilar are just not going to get consistent separation. Josh Huff is a non-entity at this point. And, the one guy you hope for in a few games, hopefully, maybe the second half of the season, is Aguilar, because he has at least the physical skill set to do some things. And you saw the great one-handed catch, but like most rookies, as I said, he giveth and taketh away. The next play was the fumble on the reverse. So, but that's what you have with rookies. You have to have growing pains. We talked about it with Eric Rowe on the opposite side. You gotta put him out on the field. You got to get him learn from this, and hopefully he can help you in the second half of the season.
We talked about the injuries yesterday. Peters, Kendricks, Maxwell, Bear, offensive line. I mean, there's a lot of guys going down with injuries here. And you just mentioned it. You're playing with backup guys. A lot of areas, John, you're playing with third-string guys. Does this just have the feeling of, hey, this is just going to be one of those years where if you can't beat the battle of attrition, it's going to be a long season?
Yeah, it could be. Injuries can derail any season. We saw it. We've already seen it in Dallas. I mean, they've gone from legitimate Super Bowl contenders to basically a bad football team because they lost the wrong two people. And the Eagles have had a significant series of injuries throughout the roster. And, the Michael Kendricks one is the most disturbing one to me because those hamstrings tend to linger, especially with players like that. So I could see that being an issue for weeks and weeks. And obviously they need Jason Peters on the field. You saw the difference. Even though he might not be what he was 2 or 3 years ago, as far as being the best left tackle in football, there's still a pretty significant downgrade when you go from Peters to Tobin. And if that offensive line is going to get anything going at any point, they need him on the field.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And obviously yesterday, I mean, they're going with Dennis Kelly as the third guy. I mean, you were at training camp a lot. I guess, that's one of the faults of this team is they didn't add offensive linemen. And really, is Dennis Kelly the next best option they have at that spot?
Yeah, I mean, he is, and that tells you. I mean, they're hardly the only team in the NFL that lacks depth on the offensive line. That's been poor offensive line play has been a narrative throughout this league, not just here. So a lot of guys are having a problem. It's a similar situation. We always talk about quarterbacks transitioning from college to pro and all the spread offenses. It's really hurting the offensive linemen, too, because you have all these athletic guys who aren't used to getting down in a three-point stance. They're used to pass blocking all the time. So there's a dearth of good offensive linemen, and very few teams have backups. So when you're down to your third guard, you're going to have a problem, and it's hardly Philadelphia. It's not going to be the only issue. It's going to be an issue in every single city. So that part of it's just bad luck. The bigger question is, the starters. I thought, I know I'm on an island, but I thought Gardner was playing well enough to win with. I can't say the same about Alan Barber, and certainly not Matt Tobin or Dennis Kelly.
No, and Peters isn't playing at the same level, and quite frankly, Johnson isn't either. Now, Johnson, with some injury issues, he's kind of grinding it out there. Probably, I don't even know what they would have done had Johnson been out for an extended period of time. What was the scenario that would have been brought to the table had Johnson not been able to keep playing?
Yeah, they probably would have had to kick Kelly out to right tackle. You probably, at some point, Brett Selleck, you only have a certain number of guys. He might have had to play some tackles. So that's how bad it gets on game day. Because remember, you only have 46 guys up. You don't have the full 53-man roster. So when you start getting a significant injuries, obviously during this week you could sign guys, bring up guys from the practice squad. So it's not an issue from week to week, but in the game, if you suffer 2 or 3 injuries on the offensive line, you're in deep, deep shape.
Yeah, sure are. We saw this a couple of years ago, John, in that one season with Andy where, they had 4 starters go out and then just turned out to be a mess.
Yeah, and you kind of saw it at the beginning of last season when Nick Foles wasn't playing well. They had a lot of injuries on the offensive line when Kelsey went down and Mathis went down, and that's when sort of Nick started to struggle. And part of it was he didn't feel comfortable with the guys in front of him blocking. Now you have a similar situation, but you don't have the talent of, a Pro Bowler like Evan Mathis or Jason Kelsey coming back from injury. And again, to me, the biggest underreported story of this entire season was what has happened to Jason Kelsey. He has gone from a Pro Bowl level center to being a guy who is hurting week in and week out.
Yep, and obviously there is, and him yesterday, another guy boiling over in frustration saying, it's a disgrace. We haven't been good enough. We can't block. We can't do this. We can't do that. Is that a sign that they're not believing in what is basically Chip Kelly's trying to portray to them? Are you starting to see some cracks in the culture?
Yeah, that's what happens. That's what losing does, and that's Chip's biggest issue. is the fact that keeping that locker room together, because it's easy to buy in when you're winning football games and you're winning consistently. But when you start losing and you start losing in an ugly fashion, it's human nature to start pointing fingers. And, one guy will look at another and say, this is the issue, and it goes from there. So, I often talk about, people think coaching in the NFL is about X's and O's and just what happens on the field. The far bigger issue is managing personalities. There's a lot of people in that locker room. And we always talk about Chip. He wasn't able to manage a big personality like Deshaun Jackson or LaShawn McCoy. And that might be his biggest issue as a coach, the fact that he hasn't done a very good job managing the personalities in his locker room.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Obviously Chip seems to be a lot more on the defensive, all right? I mean, it seems like and here's another thing. In Andy, the fans would get mad because Andy always took the responsibility. I need to do a better job. We need to put the players in better spots. It seems that Chip is, no, I'm calling the right plays. We need to execute them better. And there's plays to be made. We're not making them. It seems that he is really throwing the players a lot more at fault here than the coaching staff.
Yeah, he is. People are going to start missing Andy Reid. It might have been boring, but it was the right thing to do. You don't throw your players under the bus. And this execution narrative that Chip Kelly tries to sell week in and week out, that if they just did the things the way they were taught, this would be a 4-0 team, which is basically what he's saying. That's not realistic. There's clearly a dearth of talent at certain positions on this team. And I've said Chip's biggest mistake was the power play with Howie Roseman, because if you go into this season with Howie Roseman as your GM and things sort of break the same way they are, well, you can kind of, wink and say, I don't have good guards. I don't have a deep threat at the wide receiver position, and blame the guy putting together the roster. Well, who's putting together the roster in Philadelphia now? It's Chip Kelly. There is no buffer.
So does he get that 1 year of, hey, I had to make a lot of changes. There was not a lot of continuity here. Give me another opportunity to let these guys get a full season together and then a second training camp. Because, quite frankly, a lot of teams that, make a lot of changes, it takes a little – there are growing pains. I mean, the Dream Team year, they were not very good at the beginning, but – they did finish 8-8. They did play a lot better down the stretch of that year once it seemed like they felt more comfortable with each other.
Yeah, I agree with that, and that's what I was saying before. Is the expectations is the biggest storyline here, because they were unrealistic. And if, from being at NovaCare basically every day, I don't get the feeling that organization thought they were a Super Bowl contender. I think they understand this is a process. It's probably a 3-year process, but that's a difficult thing to sell to this fan base. As I said, this is a continuity-driven league. You don't plug and play and become a superstar-level team, a Packers, Patriots, whoever, level organization by doing that. You have to build up the continuity, and there was just too much significant change starting at the quarterback position, but also the offensive line, also wide receiver, running back, all over the field. 3 new starters on the defensive backfield. If we want to include the nickel, there's really 4. There's too much change on this team to assume that they were going to be a Super Bowl contender, but somehow that became the narrative because of one preseason game in Green Bay, which the Packers didn't care about.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. They're going to keep Caleb Sturgis. Were you surprised by that?
A little bit, but only if you don't see what's going on in the league as a whole. It's been a bad year for kickers, and, I think the issue is that extra point. I think it was Jay Feely who went out and kind of explained it. With the old extra point, it was, sort of a way for kickers to get a gimme and build their confidence. Now everything is there's so much pressure on some of the younger guys are really struggling with that. And we all know kickers are a strange breed. Once they miss one, it starts creeping in their head, and it's sort of like a a bad golf swing. You can't get it right again. Tampa Bay cut their kicker for the second time. Pittsburgh, you saw what happened to Josh Scobie. They cut him this week. It's happening all over the league. So I don't know if there's anybody on the street that would be better than Sturgis. So you have to just, kind of fight through the hiccups and hope he gets it back. But that is right. If the Eagles made their kicks, they'd be 3-1. And granted, they wouldn't have played well, but we wouldn't be talking all doom and gloom. That's how razor thin this margin of error is in the NFL.
Well, that being said, with that narrative there, them basically being a couple of kicks away from being 3-1, should we say, look, this season is not a lost season? That Chip said, we just need to do a couple little things. We're getting close. We're right there. They were 1-3 a couple of years ago. Is there anything to make us believe that this team, a couple of weeks down the road, can turn their season around and maybe be a 3-3 team 2 weeks from now and be right back in the mix?
Yeah, well, first of all, they're already in the mix. It depends what your goals are. This team is one game out of first place. They're in a bad division. They could win this division. By no means is this a lost season. But again, if you were expecting them to be a Super Bowl team, yeah, it's a lost season. It's not. This team has absolutely no chance to compete with the Green Bays of the world, New England, Cincinnati, Denver, even Arizona, which had a hiccup against the Rams. They have no chance at competing with upper echelon teams like that. So if that was your goal, if that was your template for success, it's a lost season. But if you're talking about the playoffs, this team has as good a chance as anybody, even they're in last place, because this is a very, very bad division.
Very bad. We saw one of them last night, obviously, in Dallas. And then the Giants, they looked very capable the other day. They might be, as you picked, in Who's Out, which we'll do tomorrow at 3:30 live at the Golden Nugget. You have the Giants win the division. I might be following you on that one tomorrow when we have that. John and I will be live for 4 hours together tomorrow, live at the Golden Nugget in Atlantic City. We'll have plenty more to discuss on this particular game and everything else moving forward here on the Sports Pass. All right, John, thanks a lot, man.
All right, see you tomorrow, Mike.
We'll see